Harvey was catastrophic, flooding like we've never seen before. Dozens of lives lost and more than $120 billion in damage. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Martin.
And I'm Rashi Vatz. And for so many of us, it's hard to believe Hurricane Harvey was 5 years ago. For others, it seems like yesterday. Well, tonight, we're going to take a look back at the storm's toll, the changes it forced, and also the resiliency of our region.
All right, well, Hurricane Harvey is now a major Category 3 hurricane, and we're right now waiting to see just how much water it dumps on Houston and the surrounding areas.
High tide is just about to hit. At 6:45 is going to be high tide here.
You end up with this stream of heavy rain that comes in.
And you are looking now at some pretty sobering video of Hurricane Harvey from up above.
Here in Galveston, they're hunkering down.
I mean, this thing is a Category 4 major hurricane.
Everywhere, pieces of the residents' homes that have just been blown off the top.
We're continuing to see the landfall that was made by Hurricane Harvey.
The center of circulation made landfall near Rockport late last night and has moved inland.
This is South Maid Creek, and you can see it's almost over its banks.
Calm periods, and then all of a sudden you'll get one of those gusts.
So it's going to be rough going here for the next several hours.
Take a look at the Highway 59 Feeder Road Bridge. The water is extremely close to touching the bridge.
And if it happens to set up over the city, it's going to cause some big problems.
And then we had to turn around once we realized how high the water was.
We have a number of standby shelters ready and waiting and stocked.
Apparently someone has run off the road. Very serious flooding going on in the southeast part of Harris County.
Right now we are deep into the life safety mission of helping people be rescued.
The roads that lead in and out of the neighborhood are going to be flooded.
Can't tell you how many people we've seen just walking on the freeway.
Water level now is actually going to rise again.
People are trying to use the roadway, but they're being diverted.
18 counties in the state of Texas made a federal disaster declaration.
Several cars underwater. This is in the 5th Ward area.
This is unprecedented. Our country in the United States of America has never, ever seen a storm like this.
The Rockport and Port Aransas areas, a little over 3 hours southwest of Houston, took a direct hit from Hurricane Harvey.
And they certainly did. In fact, Port A city leaders estimate every single business was damaged, along with 85% of the homes in the town. Fox 26's Matthew Seedorf reporting from there as life slowly returns to normal.
This tourist Texas town busy again. The beach and businesses in Port Aransas booming. Now 5 years since Hurricane Harvey.
Leading up to Harvey, tourism was at a great place. I think now we're at the kind of same level.
Beth Owens owns several businesses in Port A.
We told our employees, if you help us rebuild, we could get back open.
Within months, the team cleaned up and rebuilt, transforming their damaged restaurant and fishing shop to what they are now.
I can't believe it's only been 5 years. We're much better where we are today than we were before Harvey.
August 25th, 2017, Harvey made landfall near Port Aransas as a Category 4 hurricane packed with 130-mile-per-hour winds and a massive 12-foot storm surge.
The water line was right here. That's the mean water line. So the water was this high,
causing an estimated $1 billion of damage just in Port A.
Houses are being restored. A lot of them are getting tore down and they're building new ones.
While business is back for much of the island, inside these homes, construction continues now 5 years later.
The insurance company don't want to pay.
A.W. Pierce finally getting a check in the mail today.
Until they pay me, I'm not spending a lot of money.
He and his neighbors are still rebuilding, fighting insurance companies to pay for Harvey's destruction.
It's a battle.
Did you ever imagine you'd still be doing this after 5 years?
Well, after about 2, I did. I said, I don't know when it's going to end.
Much of Port Aransas stronger after Harvey, never forgetting the dangers of living on the Gulf Coast.
I think our town is better prepared. I know as business owners we're better prepared.
Reporting in Port Aransas, Matthew Seedorf, Fox 26 News.
And personally, I was out in the field and vividly remember being out in the rain and floodwaters with my photographer, Raymond Ramirez, for several days, working long hours like many of us did, but didn't even have the time to feel exhausted because we just knew how so many people needed help. And we recently revisited one location, and wow, what a difference.
It was definitely like a horror movie, literally.
It's just bad. It's real bad.
It's heartbreaking, man.
From piloting high waters on a boat, there's so many of these stories, and helping rescue those from the torrential waters, to now driving on the same streets in the Grand Mission neighborhood on the west side.
Can y'all believe we were literally on the boat in our own neighborhood? Like, we couldn't even leave not just our doorstep, but our neighborhood in our vehicles.
Lakeitha Davis, who lives in Grand Mission, says she actually saw us on a boat. We were with the rap artist and community activist Trade the Truth.
As the hours went by, the rain just got worse and worse, and so we were watching the news as the day went on, and we're like, that looks like the back of our neighborhood. And so everybody immediately tuned in.
A white t-shirt on the trees outside of a house indicated to first responders and volunteers that residents inside needed to be rescued. That's exactly what Davis did to get her family, including her 8-year-old daughter, to safety.
Woo! She's on the video like, woo! And I'm like, you don't understand, but I'm glad you have that because it reflects on adults who are literally scared. They picked us up on one of those and it didn't have a shed or anything, so everybody's still just in the back just being transported. So we got to Kroger's and it was like third world. You would swear it was almost the end of the world, literally. It was very scary.
Her daughter's school, Juan Seguin Elementary in Fort Bend ISD, suffered extensive damage. Now as we talk to Davis, in front of Seguin Elementary, all seems normal. But to this day,
from my child's perspective, every time it rains, she still gets scared, literally.
But one thing is for sure, come hell or high water, we remain Houston strong.
I think it just taught everybody we just have to look out for each other. It's stuff like that. It's not any time to think anything other than that. You know, you don't want to lose lives. It was unfortunate some people did, but I think it really did bring everybody together, but in a good way. It really did.
Some unforgettable moments. And with this Fox 26 Hurricane Harvey special continues, a look at the 5 years of frustration felt by thousands of Houstonians waiting for money to make their repairs to their homes.
Relief and assistance came in all forms during Hurricane Harvey. One of the city's favorite philanthropists helped with soft beds. With a video message, Jim Mattress Mac McInvale opened up his gallery furniture stores as shelters for hundreds of fellow Houstonians.
Well, recovery from Hurricane Harvey has been a long process and an incomplete process for thousands of Houstonians. I sat down with Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner to talk about the mess that has delayed recovery for so many. Significant progress is evident across Houston 5 years after Harvey. Hundreds of homes have been elevated, and the city has spent tens of millions on drainage projects.
We probably have dredged more than 3 million cubic yards.
But hundreds of Houston families are still waiting to repair or rebuild their homes or be reimbursed, as much of the federal relief money remains tied up in politics between the city and state.
Yes, it becomes messy. It becomes contentious, and it is a bad marriage.
Following Harvey, Houston and Harris County received more than $1 billion federal dollars to help homeowners rebuild. But some of that money never made it to residents. The state's General Land Office tells Fox 26 that's largely because Houston was slow to roll out programs to distribute the funds and repeatedly missed key benchmarks required by the state. Mayor Turner says the state's General Land Office created some unnecessary hurdles.
For every file, let's say on your home, we had to go through about 70 checkpoints that the state imposed. And then the state had the discretion to say, yes, we like what you sent, or we don't. And if they didn't like what you sent, they sent it back and said, do it again.
Then there was the more than $4 billion Congress approved for flood control projects. Houston and Harris County got none of that infrastructure money, even though it was among the hardest hit areas.
Explain to me why the state GLO, would send more money to Brenham, Texas, than to Houston.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development found the Texas General Land Office, led by George P. Bush, discriminated against black and brown communities by snubbing Houston and Harris County out of the infrastructure money. So the GLO then later awarded $750 million to Harris County. Still, much of that money has not been distributed.
It should be completely unacceptable to anyone that we still have people waiting 5 years later for relief aid.
Charles Blaine leads the Houston nonprofit Urban Reform and says the rollout of federal help in Houston has been nothing short of a disaster.
And it's shared blame all around, but the big problem has been is that these, particularly the state agencies and our local governments, have been fighting over who gets to dictate what the rules are and who's going to decide who the applicants who receive the funding are, rather than deciding just to come together and help everybody as fast as possible.
How do we get past this bad marriage and make sure people get the money they need to rebuild and repair?
Well, that's a good question, and that's why who you elect is very important. Irrespective of the problems that we have with the state, the city has a responsibility and an obligation to do whatever it can with the dollars that we do have.
As Mayor Turner approaches his final year in office, he's focused on working with FEMA to finish 4 flood control projects, including one in the hard-hit area of Kingwood. Well, for the communities hardest hit by Hurricane Harvey, the lessons of preparing for the worst were learned the hard way. Tonight, we look at the changes they've made. In hard-hit Dickinson in Galveston County, there are now 8 sections where victims are actually eligible to have their homes bought by the city.
That's because it's a community that has fallen victim to just so many hurricanes. Fox 26's Greg Grugan took a trip back to the city where he watched Harvey unfold.
When Harvey's torrential rains hammered down, no community was hit harder and deeper than Dickinson.
The water's rising and it's getting inside the truck, and I can't swim.
In a matter of hours, a full 85% of Dickinson's homes and businesses were fully inundated with water. Calls for rescue soon followed, hundreds of them.
I've got water all around me.
People crying desperately for help.
Police Chief Ron Morales remembers clearly the outcries.
It was like someone had a gun to their head fixing to pull the trigger fear.
And they kept coming.
And they're pleading with you. Please, please, it'll rip your heart out.
Short on rescue craft, surrounded by rising water with no way in or out, Morales put out the call for help. What happened next is the stuff of legend. John, I've seen dozens of rescues out here. It is the most compelling rescue effort I think I've ever seen.
They came in and just boat after boat after boat.
And they've been bringing them in 2s and 3s and 4s. The elderly, the very young, and just regular folks who can't get out. The water is too high.
To me, all the volunteers are the heroes. Everybody that volunteered, and they were countless people.
I'm feeling very fortunate that I'm alive and that I got saved. You know, and that's all that matters.
Oh, they're wonderful. Wonderful angels.
It's just an incredible spectacle of compassion and courage and folks just doing the right thing, getting people out of harm's way to higher ground, to a place where they can start to rebuild.
What unfolded here was awesome.
Incredibly, not a single Dickinson life was lost beneath Harvey's deluge. And while 5 years after the storm, physical scars of the disaster remain, hard lessons have in fact been learned. Are we better prepared for the next storm here?
Absolutely. We have come a long way.
As in the purchase of high-water vehicles and rescue boats. Haunted by the voices of the helpless, Chief Morales and community leaders are on a mission. That is, recognize the shortcomings of the past and never, ever repeat them. In Dickinson, Greg Grugan, Fox 26 News.
It is hard not to feel something just seeing those pictures again. Well, as we mentioned, there are now several sections in Dickinson where homeowners who suffered extensive property damage during Harvey and live in places that face chronic flooding can have the city buy out their homes. Dickinson right now has more than $9 million to make that happen.
As we here at Fox 26 worked through the storm, we worried alongside you and our families and friends. We share our stories next.
Well, our Fox 26 family was with you before, during, and after Harvey. Not only were we doing our best to keep you safe and informed, many of us were struggling with how to keep our own families safe. And I remember, Rasha, you had a newborn at the time.
Yeah, he was just a few months old, Ryan. So I had to go home, and I tried to go home in between coverage just to make sure that he was okay. But you know, that's just the story for so many other people. It was just such a trying and emotional time for all. Our Chelsea Edwards sat down with a few members of our Fox 26 family to hear their stories.
The initial rain ban that came in that night of August 25th was unbelievable.
We got the call that it would be all hands on deck and everyone needed to make their way to the station.
No commercial breaks, just 24 hours on the air. You know, producer after producer, and producers coming in and working for 12 hours straight.
We're sleeping on couches, but it didn't matter. We were so exhausted at the end of those shifts that we would crash.
Where a tornado touched down.
We were told to prepare for the worst. We didn't think the worst was going to come, but it did.
We turned into this neighborhood, and looked perfectly fine until you kind of came around the corner. There was 3 houses that had obviously been struck by a tornado, and but the other ones were untouched.
We had so many tornado warnings, one after another, after another, after another. It became so stressful. And when the one formed over Pearland, and I knew that my little nephew was at home, he was 2 months old, and I got actually really scared, really emotional.
Hope it don't come over here.
Harvey made its landfall, and then it circled back around, and then it just hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered. Our maps didn't even really completely make sense on the rainfall. It was so much.
Photographer Tori Walker and I, we started traveling. They moved us from northwest to the west side. We went along I-10. I was following him in my personal vehicle, mistake number 1. And we went into areas where the water was above our hood.
We started heading back in the opposite direction of Beltway 8, and I'm going in the wrong direction, which was the first time I've ever done that ever in life, but it was cool. So did that, got to Highway 90, and started headed towards, Reliant area. And again, all those dips, just like water for days.
You always go in thinking you're going to be brave, but then when you have water around your entire vehicle and over your hood, you start to freak out.
Photographer Joe Lamford and I were on the Ship Channel Bridge in an SUV for hours, from about 11 o'clock p.m. until maybe 8 a.m. We were there all night long, and you couldn't stay too low on the bridge because you didn't know how high the water was going to come up, and then you couldn't drive up too high on the bridge because it was so windy. We didn't know if the SUV would get blown off the Ship Channel Bridge. And then every few minutes we would get alerts on our phones, that big screeching sound that says, "Take cover, a tornado is coming your way." At one point she called me. I'm about to get emotional thinking about it. She called me and she said, "Mom, are you at the station?" And and I don't make it a routine to lie to my daughter. And I said, "Yeah, I'm at the station." And she said, "Everything's good. I was worried about you." And I'm like, "Oh, don't be worried about me."
Once the wind and the rain was gone, most people thought that it was over with. But to a certain extent, that was the beginning of something that they had never experienced before.
And it really was just the beginning.
And it was also the beginning, Rashi, of weeks and months of people helping people, proving we truly were Houston strong.
Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to scan the QR code on your screen right now to find extended coverage over at fox26houston.com.
Well, we couldn't fit everything into just one half-hour special, so here's more of our look back at Harvey 5 years later.
One of the things that happened after Harvey was people changed the way they planned for a hurricane. Here's meteorologist John Dawson with that.
Harvey showed Houston that any one of us could be dramatically impacted by flooding. It's not just something for those living along the coast or people that live near a bayou. So life jackets and personal flotation devices are now being included in hurricane kits. And people are also buying small inflatable rafts to help transport really young or older dependents that can't walk through deep water. And I also remember in the middle of one of those scary Harvey nights during those unyielding downpours when public officials advised against climbing into your attic to escape flooding unless you had an axe or other means to break out of it. So hatchets and small axes are now common in hurricane supplies. This one is fairly inexpensive and simple, and I know some people would buy one like this and just leave it laying in their attic all the time. This is a large format multi-tool. It has the axe blade, but it also can contribute to your supplies with some other built-in tools as well. And finally, let's talk about protecting your digital assets with tech expert Juan Guerrero Torres.
Because of flooding, sometimes you need to not only have a backup at home, like a USB drive that is not connected to the network, that you can actually unplug and take with you in case of flooding, but also to make sure that you have all your digital assets back to a cloud that you trust. And what are your digital assets? Pictures, videos. Sometimes you could have cryptocurrency, copies of your passport, copies of sensitive documents. If you have an Android, you probably want to upload them to a Google Drive. If you have an iOS device, you could probably use iCloud. All these personal clouds are allowing to sync up your device, your pictures, the picture of your babies, the picture of your family, pictures of your deceased relatives to a cloud that is rock solid secure.
Harvey has shown us that anywhere in Houston can flood and should be planned for. I'm meteorologist John Dawson.
As Houston recovered in the past 5 years, it also saw major design changes.
That's right. Often what people think of now as scenic additions to neighborhoods are flood control plans. Fox 26's Greg Grugan explains.
On the near southwest side, Houstonians can find a half-dozen man-crafted lakes, the banks of which are laden with wild grass and rising timber. And while a haven for walkers and bird watchers alike, the principal mission of these willow water holes is purely defensive, a 291-acre receptacle to drain the danger from a Harvey-like deluge.
I never realized the power of water until the doors aren't open and it's coming in and there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Bill King endured the repercussions of a downpour so long and intense, Willow's capacity to retain 600 million gallons of runoff was simply not enough.
On that fateful day, we got 6 inches in the house.
King's home was swamped, along with those of hundreds of his friends and neighbors. And yet, if anything, the flooding only confirmed his support for more retention, because without Willow, so many more homes would have been inundated with high water.
To me, it's just plain old common sense. If you have more places like this that can hold water out of residential and business areas, we need it. we need it.
Boosted by a $2.5 billion voter-approved bond issue, more than 160 projects are underway across the county. King says even Willow has benefited, with the completed culvert to nearby Prairie Lake increasing its capacity. That said, he's troubled by the slow pace of protective progress as Houstonians approach the peak of yet another storm season.
The more it's built out, the less ground there is for the water to soak up into, so you need places that will hold it. It occurred once, and the climate is not improving.
Well, 9 years before Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Ike struck just east of Galveston Island, causing some extensive damage and a lot of flooding.
The idea of building the so-called Ike Dyke to protect against future storm surge and flooding has been developing ever since.
And Fox 26's Tom Ziska shows us the expensive, complicated project got an important vote of support.
By the time Ike roared ashore, storm surge had already topped the Galveston seawall, and Category 2 winds virtually wiped the Bolivar Peninsula clean of homes and businesses there. Along its path, Ike caused $38 billion worth of damage.
It was shocking to see how much of this island was destroyed.
Galveston Mayor Craig Brown remembers getting off the island just in time, with concern that a stronger storm with a slightly different track into Houston would be even worse. The idea of building a barrier that could hold back the storm surge was born. Mechanical gates, pumps, and barriers modeled after similar flood control in the Netherlands was proposed for the entrance into Galveston Bay and along the coast from High Island to the west end of Galveston Island. The Ike Dyke, as it has become known, would cost more than $30 billion. This summer, both the House and Senate voted to authorize the Army Corps of Engineers to begin planning for the massive project. Friendswood Congressman Randy Weber, who has co-sponsored the Texas Coastal Spine Authorization Act, the official name of the project, is cautiously optimistic politics won't get in the way.
If the president would be for it, continue to be for it, that would go a long way. Long way of answering your question, do I sense any opposition? Not yet.
Nederland kent een lange geschiedenis van overstromingen.
Dutch professor Bas Jonkman is a flood expert and has consulted on the Ike Dyke design. He says plans like these are monumental and is not surprised it has taken so long.
In that sense, I think it's not going slow or anything, but it needs its time, and it would be a great accomplishment if this kind of more proactive planning would indeed be accomplished.
For those close to the water, leaders say there is wide belief that it must be accomplished to protect life, property, and the interests far beyond the Gulf Coast.
We're the gateway for one of the largest refinery systems and shipping industry in the world here in Galveston. And that in itself has connotations not only for this area, but for the entire nation and the world.
But in the years still that it would take to construct, supporters say the Texas coast remains vulnerable. Tom Ziska, Fox 26 News.
Hurricane Harvey was emotionally traumatic and had serious mental health impacts on our community.
It certainly did, and researchers believe half of those in heavily affected areas suffer probable post-traumatic stress disorder, including their pets. Here's Fox 26's Melissa Wilson.
Rebuilding homes while reliving memories of a massive storm like Hurricane Harvey can prompt terrifying feelings.
PTSD can be diagnosed when you have threat of severe harm, significant harm, loss of life, or you witness this threat. So a hurricane certainly meets that level of exposure.
It was tough trying to survive or work through the storm. Former Harris County 911 operator Janika Hayden.
We were getting backed up with calls, as well as HPD was getting backed up with calls. So it's like, it was very chaotic.
Thousands flooding the phone lines, desperate for help. It also took a toll on those taking the calls.
It felt like sometimes that my best wasn't enough.
Frantic victims started calling TV stations. Fox 26's digital content creator Carolina Sanchez stretched her job duties to answer phones.
I could not help them.
And they're very frustrated because you're the first person that they can reach.
Carolina did what she could, navigating them through an app to find a rescue team, but she wanted to do more.
It's tough to live with knowing that you are so helpless in helping somebody who desperately needs it.
Carolina sought help from a counselor and was diagnosed with PTSD. For a lot of people, just being at home in a storm is difficult now, but then you try to drive in a storm like this, and that adds a whole new level of fear, and with reason.
You like to sleep in my bed, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is my bed safe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And go under the covers.
Many children are even more scared of storms now than before Harvey. Texas Children's Hospital establishing the Harvey Resilience and Recovery Program, treating children for up to 4 years after the storm. Even our four-legged friends, like Jennings, suffer, devastating for those who depend on service animals.
It totally freaked him out, and he's having panic attacks, and he was diagnosed with PTSD.
We have had 15 inches of rain in about 3 hours' time.
And Deering's veterinarian had to start providing sedatives to her dog on stormy days after Harvey.
She just shakes uncontrollably, and we just feel so bad for her. We want her to have relief from that anxiety.
It's hard to get pets over it, but Dr. Rana Cherno with UT Health Houston wants everyone to know it is possible for people to overcome PTSD from a storm.
We might want them practicing going out to their driveway, sitting in their car during the rainstorm, getting used to it, and then maybe driving around the block if that's safe, getting used to it, and then maybe driving to someone's house if that's safe, until you get used to it. And you do this repeatedly till it's a little boring. And that's how you know you're getting better.
Baby steps, but hope that with practice, it can get better. Melissa Wilson, Fox 26 News.
And thank you so much again for joining us for this look back at Hurricane Harvey 5 years later.